Hello and welcome to the Supplier Summit 2022. In this talk, we're going to be discussing the nuances of distributor management for niche spirits brands. This is a recorded interview due to the demands on Rob's time, but please be sure to leave a comment and questions in the page so that Rob can answer them later. If you haven't already, please head to who'smyrep.net and set up a free profile to help buyers find you in your territory. So let's talk about Rob. Rob is has had a very long and prestigious career in brand building and is the current vice president of sales in the Atlantic division for St. George Spirits. With over 20 years of sales experience, and that's just liquor and wine, Rob is a master of the craft of brand building, route to market strategy, and generally speaking, getting the job done for brands, as in helping them deliver to consumers. So Rob has worked in some of the brands that are now household names, including Ketel One, DonQ Rum, Barrows Intense Ginger Liqueur, Woodford Rye, Old Forester's extensions, and now he is in charge of making sure that people know what St. George Spirits brands are. So Rob is a road warrior. He's been traveling to multiple states every week for months and months and months on end, years on end. But he's based in New Jersey, and his territory includes New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland, and now Virginia, as well as Washington, D.C. So he's making deals with buyers and distributors on behalf of St. George Spirits as their vice president of sales. So the focus of our talk today is how to generate excitement and find a home for niche spirits. And St. George is the perfect case study with its hyper niche, almost hobby-like obsession with micro distillates and small run productions. So Rob, thank you so much for speaking with us today on the Supplier Summit. We're so glad to have you. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me, Jason. I appreciate it.
So you mentioned that representing St. George is one of the proudest elements of your career. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Well, I mean, if you look at my history and everything I've done, and I've worked on some iconic brands, massive brands out there, you know, St. George may be unique in the fact that there's a rich history of 40 years. And honestly, the people I work for are really, really amazing people. I actually consider them friends now, as opposed to just being an employee. They really have an honest look at what they want to make, and they don't cut corners. And I'll give you for instance, there's a problem with raspberries right now, and rather than get a lower quality raspberry for our product, Lance and Dave would just assume take it off the market. You take the hit. It's a lot of cases, but they don't want to compromise what they have. So in there, it's a proud moment working for them, but also in a culmination of it. And you know, you just mentioned all the territory that I cover, and I cover it by myself right now. Hopefully at some point we'll be able to build out from there, is expanding that footprint on this rich brand in all the way across the country from where it's made in California, and seeing it get out more and more. And also, I mean, look, it's been 5 years. There's mergers, there's division changes, there's supply issues. There was a pandemic, and being able to navigate all that and still come out and on our way for another record year. I'm pretty proud of all that.
So St. George is not the traditional distillery. They don't like make macro products intended for a broader market, and it's not built for sale, the company. Like, it's like you guys do what you do, and that's what you do, and that's it.
Yes.
So how do you create a demand in the supplier and the buyer's mind for a hyper niche product that people have oftentimes never even heard of?
Well, and so there is it's funny when we're saying hyper niche. In my mind, there's two parts to this portfolio. It's pretty large, over 20 SKUs. I find that some of them, as we're going to market now, are not as hyper niche as you'd think. Because there's uses for them. Green chili pepper vodka, for instance, that could be if for use in a sports bar as well as a cocktail bar. And yes, there are the hyper niche elements like the pear brandy, our basil brandy, and that kind of thing. So it's going in, knowing your customer, or getting to know them very fast, because honestly, you have a very short amount of time to get to know them and knowing your product. I was thinking about this before coming on. The pitch is very, very important. I remember when I started to work for Ketel One, they had me out in California for 2 weeks, and it was literally the bulk of it was working on the pitch. And I remember thinking, man, 2 weeks of this, I mean, this is just nuts. But I've learned from that is I could give that presentation in my sleep. You could have me on an operating table about to go out, and I can run through the presentation, and when I wake up, I'll finish the sentence. And that's the thing is knowing your product, learning your customer very quickly, and giving them a use for what you have, and not taking up too much of their time, but giving them all the information that they need to make their decision.
Can you run us through your pitch for St. George?
Wow, put me on the spot. Well,
I mean, let's say you're on the, okay, I won't put you on the spot. Let's say you're on an operating table right now.
Well, look, the great part about it is there's a great history behind it. So I always start out like, hey, how much do you know about St. George? And I would say when I started, it was probably 90-10. They didn't know anything about it. Now I'm finding it more like a 50-50. Yeah, I know it, but they may not know that we make everything. So, I always have to start out that we started out in 1982. We're celebrating our 40th anniversary as a craft distillery. We were craft before, I guess, what people knew what craft was, even us. And the first thing I'll always pull out is our first product, which is our pear brandy that we're very, very proud of. We're in the middle of pear harvest right now. But this is what kind of grabs them in. When you pull out that 750 and you say, it takes 30 pounds of Bartlett pear to make that one bottle. And a lot of times they're like, wait, what? 30 pounds? Are you kidding me? Yes. And this raspberry brandy takes 40 pounds of raspberries to make that bottle. That's regardless if you wanted to buy from me or not, you're going to want to hear more about that. And there's a certain, when you're pitching that many products, I think I gave 6 full line presentations yesterday, making sure you have the flow, making sure your spirits are in the right order. I've had to learn from St. George what order that should be. And I've changed little things that work for me, but making sure that you're not blowing out somebody's palate with absinthe on the 3rd one and saving it for the 20th one, that kind of thing. And just having a little bit of knowledge on each of the products. If you're at a cocktail bar, take a quick look at the cocktail list. I like to go online before I go in and just have a couple ideas. Well, they have a gin cocktail that they're using XYZ gin in, and man, I think my terroir gin go really good in that cocktail. They're using something with green chilies. Well, I got a green chili pepper vodka. I think that'll go there. But also knowing your client too. I mean, it's different when you're in a death and company, because I'm not telling him what kind of drinks they're going to make. They're artists. Some of the best there are out there. They are tasting it and they're creating in their head. But when you're at a place that isn't as creative as that, having some real simple uses. Green chili pepper vodka, immediately somebody thinks Bloody Mary. And I say, yeah, it's going to make a mean Bloody Mary, but here, how about a green chili pepper mule? It's a simple cocktail. The bartender, hopefully can't screw it up sometimes. And then
you'd be astonished what we're capable of.
Well, you also have to take a different approach when you're going into a retailer. too many people run right up to the retailer immediately when they come in and not look around the store. You have to look around that store for the opportunity. I'll walk into a store sometimes and think, I'm selling this guy a bunch of vodka, and realize that they're a niche store for eau de vie. So, wow, I didn't even think about that going in. But, you kind of got to look at what they're doing, and not waste their time with something that's going to sit up there, because, your word is all you have. And if you have to go back and see that person again, and they're still sitting on our California shochu 2 years later, they're just not going to be happy.
I think I've interviewed a lot of reps and salespeople and business development specialists, and the through line seems to be coming from a position of service. Like, what do I have that can help you do what you want to do, and what can I do what do I have that can help you serve your customers better? Because at the end of the day, you all have the same customers. Your buyers are buying wholesale, but they're selling retail, and everybody, if nobody's buying retail, then nobody's buying anything. So I think it's, I love the perspective of identifying. But how do you, this is exacerbated by the fact that you handle 6-7 states by yourself in a car. So how do you make the most valuable use of your time in market when you have that much territory? Well,
the biggest thing is providing value. That I have to expand myself. You know what I mean? I have a daughter who plays goalie in college, and she's small. She's like 5'1". We always say, make yourself bigger. And kind of using that analogy, you have to make yourself bigger than you actually are, and provide value to a sales rep. So I read an article that was the other day that was terrifying. Honestly, how distributors now are, for the most part, they're kind of just holding our product and delivering it, because RNDC in Texas was the one that they used in the article, has over 21,000 brands. So think about that, 21,000 brands. I don't know what size the sales force is in Texas, but let's just say, there's 125, 150 people. It's probably larger because it's a larger state, but the 4-tier thing gets kind of crazy. So how much noise is out there? How many times is that sales rep, he's got to make his numbers, so he's swapping out X brand for Y brand so he can make his numbers. So you have to make sure you're valuable when you're in there, and you kind of make yourself an ambassador, so to speak. We're lucky. St. George makes beautiful spirits, and they make my life so much easier than when you and I met years ago with Nolet's, and there was a liqueur that they had out Harlem. It was a nice product, but it was an uphill battle. It was called Harlem. It was in the black bottle, and Jägermeister dominated the thing. So St. George.
It was a shot, sir. Right? They were looking for shots. The shot space.
Yeah. It was in the shot space, and an already well-established monster brand, and you're going up against it. Well, St. George isn't really going up against those monster brands. So when you have your time with that sales rep, and you have your pitch, which we just spoke about, having your pitch down, not wasting their time, and you become very valuable to them. Sort of like now I'm down in DC. I have to be down here probably like once every 4 or 5 weeks. They line up appointments for me because they know you're going to be fast, you're going to be effective, and you're going to sell me cases. And the cool part about what we do, and kind of the way the whole landscape has changed, where bars are looking for smaller brands like this and making better cocktails, is you get in on that cocktail list, and you get into that person, you become very relatable to them, and you tell the story. They have something that they can relate to, with Lance and Dave being fiercely independent, and and putting out high quality stuff. You get a customer for life. They'll always be with you, and you want to make sure that you're taking their phone number, you got their name, you send them a text. You kind of become friends. So I'm down in DC every 5 weeks. People almost think I live here, but I'm only down for a couple days, every 5 weeks, and it's working.
It seems to me, I've never seen a piece of St. George marketing. I've never seen a piece of advanced marketing. I'm not sure if I don't read the trade rags very much, so I don't know if I'm just missing it, but I've never seen a piece of digital. I've never seen a piece of anything. I've just heard of it from having a bottle that was dropped off, or in the absence of traditional marketing and a traditional marketing budget for like a big brand would have, like out of home or digital marketing or even print, whatever, how do you generate even awareness aside from the inroads that you get from the distributor reps?
Well, so I mean, honestly, that's sort of changing with St. George right now. It's an ever evolving thing as we expand. For the first time, we've just hired a really strong PR agency. I think something in like the last 4 or 5 months, we've had like 82 articles on St. George.
So I'm just not paying attention. I got it. Okay.
It's just hard, but you do make a point of like the logo and the marketing material. I love that they're very deliberate about it, and if it's sort of like with the spirits, unless they have kind of a statement to make that it's going to be high quality and something different, you won't see it, and it will be very limited. So it's kind of what they do, and they do a really good job about it. Like if somebody sees a St. George pin, it's funny. We came out with decks of cards, and we had them at BarCon in Brooklyn. And man, you would think when the people saw the decks of cards, they were just like throwing them in their bag because they haven't seen something with St. George on it. So it's cool because they keep it small, but when you get it, it's effective.
You're also quite active on LinkedIn. Have you seen that bear fruit for you?
Yeah, I kind of one of the things before I came on at St. George's is I was working on building that up for a long time. So I put my press up there, the press that comes from St. George, pretty regularly, and I've started to finish my presentations at distributors with my LinkedIn to it and say, if you want to look up press really quick, come up on there. I've garnered quite a bit of business, and I'm actually over these years now, I don't know if I'm shocked, but I'll sometimes post an article and see a couple thousand hits on it, which is pretty nice. So it seems like people are looking for it.
Yeah, there's certainly an element of virality with LinkedIn if you do it right. If you cultivate. I think my understanding is that consistency is more important than content. I guess put something up all the time. All right, so let's say you're. You've been hustling liquor and wine for 22 years. So what would you say what would you recommend your 22-year-old ago self about the characteristics that you'd be looking for that would help you advance your career faster?
Well, the first thing is we talked about have your pitch, work on your pitch. I mean, really hone it down to to perfection, but never be afraid to fail. You're gonna knock on a lot of doors. I joke around like calling on the Pennsylvania Liquor Board is like being in high school again. It's a lot of rejection. You can't be afraid of rejection, and you just can't be afraid to just walk up to anybody and use every contact you can. Always save the numbers, put a note in there, and just be, I've been doing this for a long time, and I know a lot of suppliers don't do this, but in the heart of this pandemic, when I was stuck in New Jersey, we were out wearing a mask. I literally was just driving into towns, yelping every liquor store that was in town and just stopping in. I picked up something like 114 liquor stores in 4 months. Just being relentless out there and just showing. You have to kind of, like I said, there's a lot of noise at the distributor right now. You have to show that you're an asset to them because there's a lot of noise. And you also have to, I learned this from my time at DonQ. The gentleman I worked for kind of taught me this is you kind of have to walk in confident and maybe bigger than you actually are. DonQ is up against like the behemoth Bacardi. So, when you walked in the building, you had to walk like, I'm just as big as Bacardi, even though you weren't. But just walk in with that feeling like, hey, I belong at this table.
What's the line between confidence and arrogance?
You have to have some humility. I mean, you could have confidence, but you have to be humble. I probably would say I'm one of the more confident people when I'm on a sales call, but you have to know when to be humble a little bit. It's funny. After we get off here, I'm headed down to Alexandria, Virginia. I met a gentleman who owns a restaurant down there. It's a very successful place, and he put me through the ringer when I met him. It's a little over a month ago. Maybe one of the hardest presentations I've been in. He actually kind of had me on my heels there for a second, but I hung toe to toe, and look, I showed him his, very successful. Made sure he knew that I was very honored to be there, that we would even have the presentation together. But I was very confident that my products will fit in with you. Well, we're going back today, and we're setting some things up. So you just don't want to be, I'd say, don't be a jerk off.
Yeah, it sounds easier said than done to jerk off.
Yes. I mean, if you're a jerk off, you're probably going to be a jerk off either way, and we can't help you.
All right. Well, I'm interested to hear how this interview with this particularly discerning buyer stacked up with your onboarding and training with St. George. Was it harder or was it easier?
Well, let's see.
Were there things that you didn't know how to answer?
Yes, and you know what? That's a really important thing, because the thing about St. George is you get all kinds of buyers, and sometimes they can get really, really down and dirty and freaky with some of the questions, and don't lie to them. So I didn't lie to him. I said, stop for a second. Let me write this down, and I'll have that answer for you. And I think he respected that, because from what I understand, I guess a lot of people just kind of yes him to death, or just make something up. I said, would come back to the question that you asked me. I happened to be lucky enough to text Dave Smith at that time, and he was near his phone, and he answered it within like 10 minutes. So I think he appreciated that, one, I wasn't going to just make something up, and that I wanted to be truthful. Your word is all you have. If you make a deal, you make sure you follow up with it. Otherwise it could get out. You're a guy who's not reliable. I mean, I don't know how many times I'm sitting with a sales rep after a work with, and they're like, yeah, well, this guy's avoiding my call. He owes my account this, and this, and he's not coming up with it. You have to make sure you follow up and come up with what you promise.
My God, with such a huge territory, how do you manage all of those accounts? I mean, you must have either an extraordinary mental capacity to keep track of contacts and just things that pop into your mind. But how do you keep track of all this stuff? I mean, is it spreadsheets? Is it CRM? How do you do it?
Honestly, I feel like sometimes I'm unconscious. I walked into a restaurant yesterday, and was like, as I walked in, I looked around, and I was like, man, I did a presentation here like 3 years ago. So it's hard with that many, honestly. We have a new app, which I've been using a whole lot, because I'm usually a guy, or used to be, who has little pieces of paper all over the place. And I'm the only one who can find it and organize it. We have this Karma app now that we use with VIP, which I'm finding to be very, very good for me. So I'm training myself to actually put all that information in there. So I have my notes, but and my calendar in my phone is filled with reminders of, hey, follow up with this person 2 weeks from now. Hey, say hi to this buyer. Just check in, see how things are going. So it's a constant every morning looking at my list of emails, text messages, phone calls that you have to make. And it's I'll honest, sometimes it's overwhelming, but you work through it.
So if you were to systematize this, and presumably you're going to be hiring people pretty soon, is that correct?
We hope so. I mean, there's some talk of it. St. George is very deliberate in how they do things, and so the conversation has opened up. There's some opportunities out there that we should be taking advantage of. Look, you're from New York. This job, I could stay in New York 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, and still not hit everybody. So it's just figuring out the best way to exploit that opportunity. you know, so, and look, the pandemic probably threw a few things behind because we didn't know what was going to happen. I mean, it worked out for us. I know not everybody was that lucky.
Yeah, my understanding of the pandemic was that people went towards macro brands, things that were easier on the shelf, that brands that they recognized. They weren't venturing out too much. Is that safe to say?
I would say that probably happened to a lot of brands that weren't invited to the party. We were lucky enough; we were invited to the party. You know, we're typically probably I would estimate maybe 60% on premise. All our business shifted to the off. And you know, it was pretty amazing. And look, the people I work for are amazing too, because I know my first few weeks I was like, man, I'm going to get furloughed. But and you know, I had left a pretty big company to come here, and I was like, man, if I get furloughed, what am I going to do? And they sat us down and told us the opposite. They said, you know, you're our people, and we're going to take care of you. So with that and a couple other things that have happened in my life, I'd run through a wall for these guys.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. It's you don't really hear that very often.
No.
Typically, it's the most economical solution that prevails. So, you know, bringing your experience to bear in market for 20 plus years, if you were to hire somebody, how would you train them? And what would be the most important characteristics of that person that you'd be looking for into hiring somebody?
You know, fearlessness, coachable, have a drive. You know, I'm 50 years old now. You know, there was something that you said, when are you done? I'm never done. I'm probably my hardest critic. And then honestly, you know, some things that a lot of suppliers do not teach their people. And I talk to a lot of suppliers, that are new to the game or coming into the game. I always try to stress the importance of, I know it's going to sound weird, but pricing, knowing how to do pricing and how to price your product. Price points are very, very important, especially in the retail side of things. And one thing that no one ever teaches you is pricing. And I was very lucky. Ketel One was a great experience. 10 years working with the No Let family, but I never learned the back of house stuff that's very important. The beautiful part about working for John Easton over at Sorales is he forced me to learn that part of the job, and it's invaluable. You know, I was joking around actually somebody the other night because they were asking me about rips in New Jersey. You know, Jersey has this thing called rips that it's not in any other state. And I joked around and said, well, you know, because I know how to deal with rips and pricing in New Jersey, I'll always have a job because no suppliers understand it. So I can't stress that enough is learning the back of house stuff is invaluable to your growth. Being able to know price points and figure out price points, or, you know, I remember John calling me one day and saying, you know, I got this product I'm thinking about. Tell me how much we should sell it for in New Jersey, and being able to work that back. You'll never ever know when you need that kind of experience. And you know, like I said, a lot of times your pitch, knowing your product, knowing your pricing.
So you would train teaching the pitch. You'd train pricing strategy. You would train, I mean, to some degree, local compliance.
Yes.
I mean, I'm trying to think of like I'm trying to put the position of the entrepreneurial brand owner who has more distribution than their ability to service the market. And so, like, how would they effectively use their time to make a meaningful impact in the markets that they're able to get to with a car, say, you know?
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of the relentless, you know, passionate feeling that you have about it. You know, you want to hire somebody who has passion. I mean, you know, we joke around and probably, I mean, it's not a nice joke, but you know, how many empty suits there are in this business. Somebody once said, you know, the liquor industry is made up of all the D students. You know, and I wouldn't want my daughters going into the liquor business. I'm so happy they're not. So that means they're much smarter than me. So, you know, but you have to have that kind of relentless passion for it. I don't know if I'm an anomaly, but like I'll go way back to even when I was young, I was always enamored by the packages. I collected beer cans and beer signs and all that kind of stuff. I've always loved this business. So I'd be looking for somebody who actually loves the business. I love getting up in the morning and knowing I'm going to talk about these brands. It's fun. Look, and I'll be honest with you, it wasn't always that way. I did my share of time working with some soulless brands. We won't name them on here, but it's tough on your mental health when your mind wants something that's kind of pure with soul.
Yeah, for sure. And it seems like you found that with St. George.
Yeah.
So I mean, you are very entrepreneurial. Like it seems like you have generated your own opportunities. It doesn't seem like you need a lot of direction, a lot of hand holding. Like you have a portfolio, you have a cell phone, you have a car, and you're just going to make it happen. Where did that come from, and how has that served you?
I guess I've always been that way, so to speak. At one point I had years ago, a side business. I started a concert promotion company, and it was mostly because I didn't feel like driving all the way to New York to go see the shows I wanted to see. So I just rented out a place and did them myself. It's just been kind of my way of doing things. Look, I count myself lucky because the brands that I have kind of make you want to get up in the morning and just get on the road. And it's an endless bag. I mean, I carry the whole portfolio wherever I go. I love it. I love talking to people. I love talking about liquor. I feel like if I'm not talking about music, I'm probably talking about liquor. I just love everything about it. So for me, it just comes natural. I don't know if it's natural for everybody, but and top it all off with like being able to open up a bottle of pear brandy or spice pear liqueur for somebody and seeing their face for the first time, taste that and be like, wow, what did I just have? I get off on that.
Yeah, it really is pretty astonishing what you guys make.
Yeah.
Let's just go back to the in-market stuff that you do, because I'm really concerned that people spend a lot of time in market, but they waste a lot of time. And the work with is something that is either a missed opportunity or it's the bane of somebody's existence. Probably the distributor reps, from my understanding, the distributor reps hate the work with, because they're responsible for setting meetings and some concrete things that have to happen in anticipation of an event, as in you showing up and being like, okay, I came here for meetings. I drove 300 miles for meetings and there are no meetings booked. What happens when expectations are not met in a market and you have a lot of time on your hands?
I literally I see who's around and I walk into places and just say hi. Cold call. I do a lot of cold calling, but not intrusively. Like you're walking in on them. You can't expect them to drop everything and see you now. So it's more like, hey, this is what I do. I'd love to make an appointment with you. And, 50% of the time, they're like, I have some time now. You got your stuff? Yes. The other 50% of the time, I guess it's not 50-50. Sometimes they're like, no.
Yeah.
I've walked into a store cold and been like, oh, wow, this is the wrong place to be. But sometimes they're like, yeah, I'd love to make an appointment. It's not, you probably don't bat 500, but you'll get something going. But look, I checked into a hotel in Richmond a few weeks back, and gave my card to the bartender as I was checking in, and he said, "Can you come back at 10 p.m. and show me everything?" And I said, "Yeah." And it was fruitful. It was good. So that's what I do. I think I hate to work with as much as the sales reps sometimes, because especially when you have brands like what I have, I'm not for everybody. I'm just not. And some people's runs aren't built that way. They may have one or two places. I've kind of taken the tact with getting with the local manager and saying, look, can you make 4 appointments at 4 places that fit for me? And I'll come to town. That's what we did yesterday. So I didn't work with any particular sales rep. RNDC made me 4 appointments, and they were all the appointments that that were worth my time.
Right. Well, people often talk about, making a bottle sale or a case sale, but they don't talk a lot about lifetime value. Can you speak a little bit more about like what the value of an account is, or what the value of a placement is, not, beyond the first impact, beyond the first point of distribution?
Well, look, I mean, people bounce around a lot too, so it's a little more than just the account. It's the person. That person may not be in that account next time you come to town, but you hope you made enough of an impression that they're in the next account you walk in. A great example of that was when I walked into an account down here called Jane Jane yesterday, and I looked over and she looked at me, and she was from the Columbia room. And she was so happy that I was going to be walking into Jane Jane to make the pitch. And she sat down with all the bartenders there and said, you have to hear this, you have to taste it. So you're not just relating to the account. And what I do find is my St. George customers, they become a customer and they stay a customer. The cool thing about having such a big portfolio is that, well, the bad thing about having such a big portfolio is you fall off the cocktail list because some things seem seasonal. The good thing about having a big portfolio like this is I end up on the cocktail list with a different product every quarter.
Right.
Because, spice pear really spikes in the fall. Raspberries kind of speak to the spring. So that's the cool part. So you're not just relating to the account. You need to relate to the person who's making that drink. Maybe he's the bartender who doesn't have a choice on what goes on that cocktail list. I love coming back there and seeing that guy and saying, hey, you have spice pear in the back bar. What would you make with it? And seeing what they come up with. I think you get a fan out of that because he's like, yeah, you know what? This is my idea. And he may end up being the beverage manager at the place down the road.
Yeah. It's funny. It's like, in retrospect, I was a bartender for a long time. But I used to love it or hate it when people would say, hey, can you make me something with my product? Because it could either be a challenge or it could be a burden. While we're on this particular nugget of a topic, I hated it when people would say, can you make this drink with this, 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 and this? Can you make this specific recipe? I was just like, oh, come on. First of all, I don't have that. Second of all, that's not our style, blah, 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 blah. But the thing I was thinking about last, when you're talking about how there's kind of a virality in the individual connection with an individual rather than with an account, to me, that reminds me of social proof in marketing, where people, it's much more valuable to get a recommendation from somebody that you trust, that's independent and impartial, rather than to get a recommendation from the person who's selling it. And I feel like with what you've done as far as your market, like the way you approach so many markets, the way you're kind of omnipresent in so many different places, is that you've developed a kind of ecosystem between the people that know you and that know the brand, whether it's from your time with Nolex or with Sorias or whatever it was. And I feel like that by itself is probably not enough to build a brand, but with the techniques and the tactics that you're talking about, in addition to that, is enough to get a niche brand. And I'm sorry if I keep on referring to it as a niche brand, but there are niche brands in there that are just like things that somebody would pick up a bottle for a season, put a teaspoon in a cocktail, and I just feel like with you in particular, unlike most people that I've known in the business, have developed this presence and this connection with the brand that kind of feeds on itself, that creates momentum for yourself. And you on a day-to-day basis, you kind of drive that momentum. What do you think about that?
Yeah. And you kind of hit on it. And it is amazing that, I'll get recommended. They'll recommend somebody else. That hotel I told you about in Richmond, honestly, he recommended I went to a place down the road. The owner hadn't been in, but I left my card and our pamphlet, and he called me on the phone. Turns out he was from New Jersey. So we bullshitted a little bit about New Jersey, and he cleaned out all the baller whiskey we had in Virginia with one order, and I didn't even meet him. but I was like, this guy recommended me. So there's a lot of that. Like, you know how it said you got to make yourself bigger than you are. If I ever lose this phone, I'm in trouble. There's a large number of buyers in this phone that are labeled only a way I can figure it out. And I get texts from them. One just left a bar in Baltimore the other day, and he said, hey, look, just letting you know, I left that bar, but I'm going to pop up somewhere else and call you. I honestly don't know who he is. I'm sure I met him, but I'd walk in and probably remember who he was. But it's a vast area to cover, but you just got to make yourself bigger somehow.
Yeah, and our 200,000-year-old brains don't really can't really compute more than 150 contacts, anyways. So we need technology to figure this out. But those same brains are the ones that allow us to navigate and find out where the food is. And so that's why you walked into an account and you're like, I remember I pitched this place 3 years ago. That's that's our amygdala or something else. So, all right, I wanted to ask you one more question before I let you go. How do you spend a lot of time in a car, correct?
Yeah, I live in the car.
So how do you make use of that time in the car effectively?
That's my downtime. That's kind of where I kind of decompress. I'm a huge music fan. A massive music fan, especially live concerts. And I follow quite a few bands. So I'll literally get on. I have lined up the concert I'm listening to on the ride home tonight. And I listen to them very intently. So that's my time to just kind of mellow out. I don't even notice the rides anymore.
I love that. Overwhelm is a very common characteristic of especially a newer sales rep. They don't know where the boundaries are. There's constant input, constant communication, and constant friction with buyers. And cultivating downtime and alone time and me time, I think, is very, very important. I mean, especially being the father of 2 daughters, and oftentimes being hundreds of miles away from your family. Sometimes I can imagine that in itself is very difficult.
Yeah, and in case they see it, it's 3 daughters, so I don't want one.
Oh, sorry, 3 daughters.
And look, I'm not that good at the decompressing part. I'm a work in progress. My boss, she's an absolute rock star. She's kind of pushed me to, hey, Rob, you have to unplug. You can't keep plugged in. And St. George is a very, they're very concerned about our mental health. And there were times in my life where I wasn't able to unplug. The job I had just before this was really, I just couldn't unplug ever. They're really good about making sure that we're mentally in a good shape. And it's really important. I wish I learned it earlier. Because it affected a lot of things around me, and I don't like who that person is when I'm not able to unplug.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Rob, the VP of the East Coast. VP of Atlantic Sales Division for St. George Spirits, Rob Ortiz. Thank you so much for coming on to the Supplier Summit. We very much appreciate your input and your very thoughtful expression of your experience. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
And that's it.